Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Geopolitics with Ghost. Let me change the background. Background is the wrong one. That's better. And let me aim that banner. I don't know why we got a banner there. All right. Yeah, sorry. Just I downloaded the Brave browser, which a lot of people told me to do. I hadn't been using that, and so getting all my settings acclimated, getting everything set up, and there's little ticks. It was weird. I couldn't hear any sound when that was playing. I'm running StreamYard through the Brave browser for the first time. So can people tell me in the chat, could y'all hear the music? Was the music playing in the outro? Hope it was. Let me know if it wasn't. And I am currently at my in-laws' house in the country. And they just recently got high-speed internet like back in December. And I wasn't able to stream here before that. So hopefully the stream is clear and good. I've done it a few times on Badlands Daily since then. But anyway, yeah, I'm your host, Gordon McCormick. This is Ghost of Base Patrick Henry. Today's April 4th, 2025. And this is Geopolitics with Ghost. So today we are going, this is the show where we kind of run through the week, the geopolitical news cycle, what everyone's talking about. And this week, we're going to really be talking about the tariffs. That's going to be the big one, but really Syria as well. A lot of people have been asking me to get into Syria. I was able to do kind of like a similar style version of this show on Breaking History on Wednesday, and we got to go pretty deep into Africa that day. So if you're interested in checking out the African news cycle, go check out Breaking History from this week. Matt was not able to join me, so I just kind of did a Geopolitics with Ghost on Breaking History. So today we're going to get into the tariffs. We're going to get into Syria. We'll see what else we have time for. But before then, let's say thank you to our sponsor, and that would be that would be Goldco. And I just need to get all my ducks in a row on Goldco. Are you ready for the golden age? With recent headlines buzzing about Fort Knox, it's time to shine a light on gold. We've seen questions like, is there really gold in Fort Knox? And is the government secretly moving it? But the real question is, are we going back to the gold standard? In a world where economic stability is uncertain, gold remains a timeless asset. Fort Knox, the fortress of America's gold reserve, is under scrutiny, and this might be the moment gold proves its worth once again. Don't miss out on helping to secure your future. Gold isn't just an investment. It can help safeguard against inflation, currency devaluation, and economic turmoil. Whether it's for your retirement as a family heirloom or just to have the peace of mind, this is a perfect time to buy gold. Only time will tell if we are going back to the gold standard. Help secure your wealth now. Visit badlandsgold.com to learn how you can add gold to your portfolio. That's badlandsgold.com. And yeah, this is it's pretty timely. Thank you to Goldco. It's a timely moment for that ad, given the fact that there was like, $2.9 trillion or $1.9 trillion wiped out from the U.S. economy yesterday, the stock market, because of the tariffs. And, everyone's acting like the sky is falling. And it's it is man, it's funny. It's very, very funny. It's very silly. One thing that I've noticed, and one of the reasons that I really wanted to do this show, and one thing I've tried to bring to the table on all the shows that I go on, is I try to bring nuance. I try to bring a little bit of the gray area, I guess you'd say, because everything is so polarized and everything is so binary. It's like everyone wants to be either for Trump or against Trump, for the Republicans, against the Republicans, for the Democrats, against the Democrats, for Biden, against Biden. Everything is like you're either on the team or off the team. And that is very conducive to creating these kind of monolithic ideologies where you end up with just a two-party system. You either think one way or the other way, and there's no gray area. And I've noticed that this really large anti-Trump thing has emerged among people who I think supported Trump a year ago, who voted for him even in the election. I know some of these people personally, and so it's not just like a psyop. It's not just, it's a little careless just to accuse them all of being like intelligence operatives or something like that. I think it's people who are caught up in the emotion of it. And I'm talking, of course, of like the Israel Zionist narrative. And because of that, they're starting to look at the world with these rose-colored glasses, or whatever, however you want to describe it, where everything Trump does is bad. Everything Trump is doing is in service to Israel. Everything Trump is doing must be detrimental and negative to the American people. And, even like analysts who I respect, who I listen to regularly. And I'm talking about some of the people who go on shows like Judge Napolitano's show. People who follow me know that I'm a big fan of Judge Napolitano's program and the guests he has on there. He has Colonel McGregor on every week. He has Colonel Wilkerson on every week. Those are two that I really like to listen to. There's some other people as well who I don't listen to regularly, but I will, Pepe Escobar, I listen to him every week when he goes on there. But there's some other people who go on there who I listen to when I can, but it's not necessarily appointment television, so to speak. Jeffrey Sachs would be one of them. Karen Kowalski, I think is her name. She's the retired military. I was listening to her earlier, and it's funny. Like, she was giving her analysis on the whole Houthi, like, Yemen situation, and first she started off by saying, this is just like an example of how I think even those people are kind of falling into like this TDS, because they have over the past 6 months really turned on Trump, not because they hate Trump. They actually are very open about how they think that Trump is not going to be the guy who starts war. It's just he's beholden to these donors like Miriam Adelson. And, Karen said that, the Houthis hadn't attacked any U.S. ships, but then like a few minutes later into the conversation, she was asked by Judge Napolitano, well, have they attacked any U.S. military ships? Well, yes, they have attacked U.S. military ships. Well, that's why they got struck. That's why Trump said yes to the strikes against the Houthis, because they were not only were they attacking U.S. military ships, they were openly admitting to doing it. They were like putting out rhetoric and putting out like official statements bragging about how they had launched successful and unsuccessful airstrikes against U.S. military ships in the Red Sea. And the reason they were doing that was because the ships are there to protect the Israeli cargo ships that are going to Israel. And it's like, well, you're doing this as a provocation. Under Biden, they weren't responding, but now under Trump is being very clear. Like, if you attack U.S. military ships, I don't care who you are, you're going to get, FAFO. It's very obvious to me. It's very common sense. But even to someone like that, I mean, like Karen was talking about in the same episode how she worked at the Pentagon and used to escort IDF generals throughout the Pentagon to go. IDF generals had unfettered access 20 some years ago to the Pentagon, before and after 9/11. And it's like, you worked at the Pentagon. Like, you should know better than to say stuff like that. You should know better than to act like what the airstrikes against the Houthis was not an act of war. It was a response to a provocation that should just be a one-off. It doesn't require an act of Congress. All of the people going on Judge Napolitano's show are saying it requires an act of Congress. It doesn't require an act of Congress to do a surgical strike against somebody who has attacked a U.S. military unit. Like, that is silly. And just because, some rebels in Yemen attack a military ship doesn't mean a Navy ship doesn't mean that all of a sudden we're at war with Yemen or we're at war with the Houthis. It doesn't require a declaration of war to respond to that. So I'll get off the soapbox, but the point is that there's no nuance. There's no nuance to any of this. It's like everyone just has these glasses on, and they either totally support every single thing that the Trump administration is doing blindly, or they're totally against everything that the Trump administration does. And they see nothing but evil in it. Even the people who are openly saying, while they say this stuff, I still support Trump, and I still think Trump is the peacetime president, and he's the guy who is going to bring peace. And, you get a little bit of cognitive dissonance, and it's very, very frustrating. I mean, there's no other word for it. So let's get to the news, because I don't want to spend the whole hour just ranting about this stuff. But I think geopolitics is one of those things. I said this at GART, that one of the things that I've come to realize, because obviously there's a lot of things that need to be fixed at home. And, we have great people at Badlands like Ash and CanCon focus on election integrity. So while I deeply care about that stuff, I don't go into it in my research and my content, because they're the experts, and I'm not going to do a better job than they're already doing. So I leave that to them. The reason I focus on geopolitics is that I have a background in history, and I have a passion for it. But I think it's the one thing that really speaks to people's emotions, and people's emotions are manipulated in order to get them to buy into narratives and get them whipped up into either war or anti-war or whatever the psyop is. And because of that, they're totally manipulated by the news cycle and by the way news is reported. So I think it's important to get in there and understand, pop the hood and understand what's going on underneath the surface, because then we can start to counteract some of the stories that we're being told and say, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't fully make sense, what you're saying. So that said, let's talk about these tariffs, because the tariffs are something where Jeffrey Sachs, who, while him and I agree on a lot of like the geopolitical foreign policy stuff, especially in the Middle East and Russia, he does come from like the George Bush, like neocon camp. Like that's where he cut his teeth. That's his background. So it doesn't surprise me at all that he is anti-tariff, and he thinks that Trump's making a tremendous mistake, and he's almost kind of like disparaging Trump for not understanding economics. I think Trump understands economics very well. I think that's why he's doing the tariffs. And the reason the stock market is responding negatively to this is because the Fortune 500 companies at the top of the stock market are all transnational corporations that deeply depend on the global South being a slave caste, where cheap goods are then used to flood our markets. And here's a perfect example of that I can show from today's Badlands news brief of what I mean when I say this. These are the kind of signals that I look for when I'm looking at this stuff. And I think it's worth kind of sharing these techniques so that other people can kind of understand it for themselves. So yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to share my screen. Caught myself that time. So, yeah, the story is Dow Jones futures jobs report, Powell due after Trump tariffs trigger market's worst day since 2020, since COVID. And here's the chart. Here's the graphic. I'm sure everyone's seen. It's all red. Everything's red. It's turtles all the way down, rugs all the way down. And of course, G Money is gloating because Bitcoin barely moved. And he's right. And it's great. And is what it is. But my take on it down here was here. So if you go look at the Financial Times of London, as Steve Bannon has said, is the paper of record for the party of Davos, for the globalist World Economic Forum, the globalist cabal, the City of London, the central bankers. This is their like official newspaper. This and the Wall Street Journal and a few others. But the Financial Times will really give you a pulse, especially when it comes to Trump and the economy. They'll give you a pulse, like the finger on the pulse of where they are on certain issues. And so, of course, they're coming out so hard against Trump and just talking about how much of an idiot he is. And I thought it was funny when I logged into their site last night, when I got on their website last night to do my news brief take. Over here on the side, this is at the very top of the website. Over here on the side in the margin, you'll see there's an op-ed from the editorial board. And it says, it says the FT view, the Financial Times view, America's astonishing act of self-harm. Donald Trump is like cutting off his nose to spite his face of America. Right next to it, Trump tariffs. Europe braces for flood of Chinese goods after U.S. tariffs. So Europe is bracing themselves for a flood of cheap Chinese goods because all of those goods that have been manufactured and are set to go to the US are now being rerouted to Europe, to the European markets, because they got to go somewhere. And Europe obviously doesn't have the crazy tariffs they have against the United States. Europe has 40% tariffs against the United States. And I don't know what the tariffs are against China, but they're bracing now for the flood. This is exactly the point of the tariffs. And when I see Rand Paul and Ron Paul, like, I deeply respect Ron Paul. Rand Paul, I've soured on him a little bit over the past 10 years because I think he tends to have some views that on certain issues. I mean, he validated the 2020 election. I don't respect him for that. He's libertarian, and you know, sometimes the libertarians are a little frustrating to deal with because they just don't. They think that by defecting entirely from participating in the system, you can save yourself from like the evil coming after you, and that's just not true. It's like you have to jump in and be a contender in the arena if you want to protect yourself from the bad people who want to take control of the government and come after you with it. And so Rand Paul and Ron Paul are saying the tariffs are a tax. Rand Paul went as far yesterday as to go on CNBC and say that Americans have prospered under globalization, which I think is one of the most deranged things I've ever heard Rand Paul say. And I've heard him say some pretty wild stuff. And one of those deranged things he's ever said is that Americans have prospered under globalization. How many of you have prospered over the past 30 years? And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of good jobs out there. There's plenty of opportunity to make money and like have a successful life. But like when you look at just the baseline of America and like how everything has played out since the 1980s, are we in a better spot now than we were in 1985 as a country? Probably not. I don't think so. I mean, not economically, certainly not. So I just think it's really, really just out of touch to say something like that. I want to play this, and I don't know why. Hundreds of. Okay. So I hope this sound is coming through. Let me know if it's not. This was a big signal for me. This is Ben Shapiro. So let's hear what Ben Shapiro has to say.
President Trump declared that it was, in fact, Liberation Day, his giant tariff policy that he just dropped on the market unilaterally, probably unconstitutionally. Trump's reciprocal tariffs impose hundreds of billions of dollars in new taxes on Americans, be the largest tax increase since the Revenue Act of 1968. One of the biggest tax increases on American consumers in the history of America. And it's going to cost American consumers. It will cost American producers who use inputs from other countries. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plummeted immediately more than 1,000 points. The S&P 500 plummeted more than 3%. The NASDAQ plummeted almost 4.5%. There are real-world implications for this sort of stuff. Trade wars are, in fact, not good and not easy to win, particularly if you don't actually have a plan. It is predicated on a bad idea of how international trade works. A fundamental misunderstanding of trade deficits. Trade deficits they're an accounting procedure. Trade deficits have pretty much nothing to do with the health of an economy. I can name you a period in American history where there was a fairly large surplus in America's balance of trade. The entire Great Depression.
Okay, people are saying that there's no sound. Is that the case? Can y'all hear the sound? Ben started with sound and then nothing. All right, wait, hold on 1 second. Let me stop sharing because I am working with Brave browser now, so I just got to make sure that. Okay, so some people are saying the sound's fine. So I'm not going to play it again because people are saying the sound's fine. Okay, yeah, and you know, this is the reason I apologize for exposing you to Ben Shapiro because he's the worst. He's totally insufferable. But what he said right there is basically what everyone is saying, like all the Trump haters. And when I say Trump haters, I say people who have supported Trump up until this moment or up until the past few weeks or months. And the big reason that they've abandoned him is because they all think that he is totally controlled by special interests, namely the Israel lobby. Well, we got a huge signal in all of that during this deployment. And I want to go there because, the first 3 episodes of the show, we have spent some time talking about Israel. And, I've expressed the reasons why I have spent a lot of time and have a big fixation there. And I think it's because I tend to agree with the notion that Israel is, the Israeli oligarchy rather, has the diaspora, as it were, has its tentacles in DC, the Israel lobby. So what was really interesting is that when these tariffs went into effect 2 days ago on Wednesday, the day before, the Israel dropped all. I talked about that. I think I did talk about that on Breaking History on Wednesday about how Israel dropped all of its tariffs. It had 33% tariffs, and that is outrageous that Israel has 33% tariffs against us, but it did. And it dropped all the tariffs the day before. Netanyahu put out a video. We're not going to watch it, but it's him, bloviating, talking about how he did this as a favor to the American people because he loves America so much and we're such strong allies and strong partner. It's like, yeah, dude, no, you did it because you knew that you were desperately trying to get Trump not to put tariffs against you. And what's interesting is that, Bezalel Smotrich, as I joked about on DPH the other night, a month ago, March 4th, flew to DC, met with Scott Bissett, and in the Israeli media leading up to that meeting, they said that Bezalel Smotrich was very, very cocksure that he was going to go in there and tell the Trump administration, we are going to annex the West Bank. We're going to annex the entire nation of Palestine. We're going to make it part of Israel, and you're going to back us. And we didn't really get any sort of report after the meeting about that. And I didn't even hear any confirmation that he ever spoke directly with Trump. I think he was expecting to, and he didn't. I think Trump kind of relegated him to Scott Bissett. And I'm sure Scott was like, yeah, that's not my territory, dude. Like I'm the economy. I'm the Treasury Secretary. So talk to somebody else about that. That would be Hegseth or Rubio or Trump. And what's funny, in Smotrich, of course, is the finance minister for Israel. So he would be the guy to lift the tariffs technically against the U.S. And I just want to look at this article. So they drop the tariffs, and then the next day, Trump unveils a 17% tariff, and that number, of course, is going to mean something to a lot of people. But if you look at it, it's a big coincidence because it's what Trump did is he did 50% of every whatever the country had against us, whether it's China or Vietnam, for example, had a 90% tariff against us. So we did a 45% tariff against Vietnam. Israel had a 33% tariff. And if it's an odd number, they round it up. So if it was 45%, they would do a 23% tariff. So theirs was 33%, which, Freemason number worth noting. So we responded with a 17% tariff. There's a lot of speculation. And I heard this from people on X, they didn't believe it. They're like, there's no way that they meant to do this. Well, let me read this article to you. U.S. President Donald Trump has unveiled a raft of punishing tariffs targeting countries around the world, including some of its closest trading partners, in a move that risks sparking a ruinous trade war. The tariffs include a 17% duty on Israeli products imported to the United States. Israel sought to prevent the move with the directive that Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich signed Tuesday to immediately scrap all remaining tariffs on American imports. Quote, Israel steals a lot of intellectual property from, for example, the pharmaceutical manufacturers in this country, end quote. An administration official told reporters ahead of Trump's speech. And they've gone back and altered this language because the language is a little more harsh when this was first published. Speaking in the White House Rose Garden against the backdrop of U.S. flags, Trump slaps the most stinging tariffs on China and the European Union on what he calls Liberation Day. Quote, for decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike, end quote, Trump says. And it goes on to note that anyone who was imposing a tariff on us would get a reciprocal tariff, and it did end up being a 50% tariff, like a 50% of what they were charging us. So it wasn't fully reciprocal, and Ash and I were a little salty about that at first. But when I saw what he did with two countries in specific, one, Russia got nothing. Now, there were a bunch of sanctions put on Russia by the Biden administration. So Russia has already been, sanctioned by the U.S. in the past couple of years. But Trump didn't add any additional tariffs on top of that. And in fact, they're talking about lifting a lot of these sanctions as they negotiate the end of this Ukraine war. So nothing to Russia, and the never Trump crowd, especially in the Republican Party, the pedos over at the alleged pedos, I should say, over at the Lincoln Project are all pulling their hair out over that, which is fantastic. And then Israel, of course, all the other countries who weren't imposing tariffs on us got a 10% baseline tariff. So Britain, for example, got a 10% baseline tariff. Israel gets a 17% tariff, meaning they did get reciprocal tariffs despite dropping their tariffs. And now Scott Bessent is saying any country that responds, that any country that comes after us and tries to retribution to impose more tariffs, we will escalate and we will go higher. So if you come after us, we're going to come after you with higher tariffs. Which kind of locks Israel in. Like, Israel's kind of in a bad place right now because this is what they're talking about, the Israeli media, because they were, as I've mentioned on this show, their economy's in a bad spot because of the war. And now they're losing the 33% tariff they had on American goods. And and not only that, but they have to pay a 17% tariff for stuff they're sending to the United States. And that is definitely interesting. So real quick, we'll just kind of hit some of these other tariffs. The big story is China. So China has I thought I had this one pulled up. Let me just pull it up here. So China is now saying they're going to come back with a 34%. Here it is. This is from 4 hours ago from Reuters. China strikes back at Trump with own tariffs, export curbs. China is imposing a extra 34% tariff on all U.S. goods from April 10th. China puts export restrictions on some rare earth minerals from April 4th. China adds 11 U.S. bodies to unreliable entities list. Measures against U.S. come in wake of Trump tariffs. China panicked, Trump says in response. It says China on Friday struck back at the U.S. tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump with a slew of countermeasures, including extra levies of 34% on all U.S. goods and export curbs on some rare earths, deepening the trade war between the world's two biggest economies. Beijing also imposed restrictions on about 30 U.S. organizations, mostly in defense-related industries, adding to the already 24 U.S. companies punished over Trump's tariffs. Beijing's sweeping retaliation comes after Trump slapped the world's number 2 economy with an additional 34% tariffs on Chinese goods, bringing the total new levies this year to 54%. Trump also closed a trade loophole that had allowed low-value packages from China to enter the U.S. duty-free. Quote, the U.S. move is not in line with international trade rules, seriously undermines China's legitimate and lawful rights and interests, and is a typical unilateral bullying practice, end quote, China's finance ministry said. China called the new round of U.S. tariffs a blatant violation of World Trade Organization rules and have requested consultations at the WTO. Trump accused China of panicking in a comment on Truth Social. China played it wrong. They panicked. The one thing they cannot afford to do, he wrote on Friday. I actually want to let's go pull up that Truth Social post. Of course, I don't have my Truth Social logged in on Brave browser, but let me pull it up on, I think I can pull it up here if I do this right. Yeah, because they are just coming at him so hard about this, and it's I mean, Trump's just having such like almost having fun with it. Let's see. He says China played it. It's not even worth looking at. He just says China played it wrong. They panicked. The one thing they cannot afford to do. And then he has a second one, and I'll just read it real quick. It's a picture of this guy, and it says, just had a very productive call with To Lam, General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, who told me that Vietnam wants to cut their tariffs down to zero if they are able to make an agreement with the U.S. I thanked him on behalf of our country and said I look forward to a meeting in the near future. And remember this, Vietnam's tariffs, 90%. Who uses Vietnam to produce their goods? Nike. That's like where all of Nike's, as I understand it, that's like where all their sweatshops are. And we used to care about that stuff. We used to care about like the fact that we had sweatshops all over Asia that were making like clothes for Nike and these other high, expensive brands. And then they ship it over here and they market it with a branding exercise. And all of a sudden, this cheap piece of cloth material, this textile that was made by slave labor, basically costs, thousands of dollars, or in the case of Nike, $500 for a shoe. And it's just all because of branding, all because of just like a marketing exercise. And it's so disgusting. So anyway, I find that really interesting that we mentioned that on DPH the other night, the fact that maybe the ultimate goal is to get down to zero and to have like zero tariffs. But I think that this is all just like a big negotiation that we're going to see unfold. And this Reuters article does go on to say China is the third largest buyer of U.S. goods. And this is where people are kind of freaking out because they're saying that this is a tax. Well, the tax is not on the American people. The tax is on the oligarchs, really, because if you don't want to pay 34% for these goods, stop buying Chinese-made goods. Just go buy the American-made goods, and it's going to become very obvious very quickly which goods in these stores are U.S. made and which are not, because you're going to see the two products side by side. One is made in America, one's made in China. The Chinese one is going to be whatever it is, 54% more expensive, 34% more expensive, and you're obviously going to reach for the American-made one. How is that something like a bad thing? Like are we going to cry over the corporatists? Last thing on this, and then I'll go to Syria. Tucker just did I was listening to it. I haven't gotten through the whole thing, but Tucker just did an interview with Scott Bessent. Very, very timely. Let's listen to what Scott Bessent says about these people. I'm going to skip ahead to the part where he talks about let's see.
For joining us. So we're at the Treasury Department. The president had a press conference yesterday next door, in which he announced a whole new tariff regime, global. He'd been promising to do this, for 40 years, really. It came not out of nowhere, but it was clearly his intent all along, as stated, but it did rattle people, including some of his supporters. So I just wanted to ask you, big picture, where do you think this leads?
Well, Tucker, and thank you for having me. And as you said, the president's been talking about this for 4 decades.
Yes.
And this is transformational for the American economy, for the American worker, and for the new Republican alignment. And it's a combination of the old and new ideas. Some of the old ideas were put away. I always tell everyone, and they don't want to hear it, the original tariff man was Alexander Hamilton.
Yes.
And he used tariffs to fund the new nation and to protect American industry. President Trump has added a third leg to the stool, and he uses tariffs to negotiate.
Yes.
But I think this is not unlike, I was a freshman in college when Ronald Reagan came in 1980, and New Day in America. And when I talk to people now and they look back and they look at the Reagan years so fondly,
yes,
I remember what it was like, and it was choppy. And the president,
very choppy.
President Reagan stood the course. And look, this is not an invitation, but at one point in the early 80s, a farmer showed up with a shotgun at the Federal Reserve to kill Paul Volcker for raising rates. So, like I said, that's not an invitation for anybody for action, but it was a tough time. And then in 1984, President Reagan won re-election with 49 states. And I think they may have even let Mondale win Minnesota just so it wasn't a skunk.
Just to be nice, yeah.
And that's what President Trump is doing now. For years, the American worker, middle class has been eviscerated. American workers have taken it on the chin. And we're just starting to see some of the research now. Like, we're seeing research on what's called the China shock from 2004. It's just coming out now. And it's what it's what I know. But finally, academics are saying, the American workers never recovered from the China shock. what a surprise. And President Trump sensed it 40 years ago, but out on the campaign trail starting in 2015 up until last year, he has promised the American workers that the old standard of living can come back. And because what we've seen over the past at least 20 years since the China shock, but more like the past 30, are these massive distributional problems where the coast have done great.
Yes.
And the middle of the country they have just seen quality of the life expectancy decline. They don't think their children are going to do better than they are. And a lot of people don't care. And President Trump cares, this administration cares. And this is the first step towards realigning that. A lot of our trading partners, including some of our allies, have not been good partners. If tariffs are so bad, why do they have them? Why do they have them? Right? Or if the American consumer is going to pay all the tariff, then why do they care about tariffs?
Right.
Because they're going to eat them. So,
and that's the part I wanted y'all to hear. I think that is so brilliantly put. That's so brilliantly put. If the American consumer is going to pay the tariff, then why do they care? Why do the oligarchs care so much if the American consumer is the one that's going to pay for it all? You know, if Trump is responsible for the tariffs, I mean, think about this. Consider this. If Trump is responsible for the tariffs, which he has taken full responsibility for this, he's making this like his brand, right? Just like build the wall was the first term. This is like tariff the whole world. And if the tariffs are really going to be that detrimental to the American consumer, isn't Trump, by their logic, like hanging himself? Like, isn't he destroying himself? Because everyone's going to see how awful this is long term eventually, and they're going to come to despise Trump and hate Trump. Like, won't this be Trump's undoing if this is it by their logic? Of course, it's not going to be Trump's undoing. It's going to do the very thing that they don't want to happen. They don't want the prosperity. They don't want the American middle class to be unleashed. They don't want the American middle class and the small business owner to be able to pick apart like piranhas, just run through corporate America and just eat them alive, which is what's going to happen. If you couple the tariffs with deregulation, you're going to see that happen very, very quickly, I think. But the greatest point is, if the American consumer is going to pay for it, why do they care so much? And they're right. The American consumer, I mean, that is going to be passed off to them. So when the goods arrive at port, they're going to be hit with the tariff, which means they got to pay whatever it is, 17% more, 30% more, 20% more for the EU, 34% more for China, whatever the tariff is. And then they're going to pass that markup along to the end user, to the consumer at the store. Well, like I said at the very beginning, you have the two products on the shelf. One's 34% more than the other. Which one are you buying? You're going to doesn't matter like your politics. Like if you're anti-Trump, you're still going to buy the one that's cheaper. It's 34% cheaper. Why wouldn't you buy it? Why wouldn't you buy that one? It's a no-brainer. They know it's going to happen that way. They know that they can't compete anymore. And now the corporations who have been plundering our nation by using cheap foreign labor to flood our markets with cheap goods, they are no longer able to do that. And that's why they're panicking. And that's why they're angry. And that's why they say that this whole thing's going to be a failure. And shame on Rand Paul, who should know better. And Ron Paul, frankly, because I heard I haven't seen Ron Paul's on video saying this stuff, but the hubbub is that he's with Rand on this. No, it's like, this is a good thing. The mention about Alexander Hamilton is interesting, but because I've been very vocal about like anti-Alexander Hamilton on a lot of his policies, but the tariff thing was definitely an interesting little wrinkle to fund the government. And one thing that wasn't done back in that era, in the founding era, was using it as a negotiating tool. And that's something that I think the guy who wrote The Art of the Deal has brought to the table, is he's now using it as a negotiating tool to leverage his position, not only economically, but also for diplomacy, for solving conflict, war, all that kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot of potential here, and we're going to see it. Before we get to, as we pivot to Syria, let's talk about Russia a little bit. So Kirill Dmitriev, this is the Russian special envoy to the U.S., economic envoy, is in D.C. and he met yesterday with the White House. And it says Kirill Dmitriev said that the Trump administration understands Russia's position. Russian President Vladimir Putin's investment envoy, Kirill Dmitriev, visited Washington on Thursday. He is the highest Russian official to have traveled to the U.S. since diplomatic contacts were suspended in 2022. Dmitriev, the head of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, previously participated in the Russian-U.S. talks in Riyadh on February 18th, where both sides agreed to start gradually normalizing the ties severed by the Biden administration. Speaking to reporters on Thursday evening, Dmitriev noted that the U.S. President Donald Trump and his team have a better understanding of Russia's terms than the predecessor, former President Joe Biden. We are seeing absolutely clear that unlike President Biden, the Trump administration is determined to resolve the whole spectrum of bilateral issues. The diplomat said they are very respectful. They are listening to Russia's position and are understanding Russia's concerns. They are asking a lot of questions and finding compromises, he added. Naturally, there are differences, but there is dialogue, which we believe will help overcome these differences. The envoy said that he had discussions about restoring trade and normal business relations between the states. Many American companies would like to replace European companies that have left Russia. Dmitriev stressed that Moscow is ready to work on business projects that would be beneficial to both countries. Man, there's so much signal in this. And I saw that he has like a really small Twitter account, X account, like 2,000 followers. But I boosted him yesterday because he posted a picture of like DC, like the Washington Monument and everything, like the whole cityscape, and said beautiful weather here. And it was just like, that felt like he was trolling. It was awesome. So now we can pivot to real quick to Medvedev. Where did Medvedev go? Yeah, here it is. Trump's tariffs will turn EU economy into decaying corpse. Medvedev, unlike Brussels, Moscow can bide its time amid the emerging trade war, the former Russian president has said. The U.S. imposition of reciprocal tariffs on EU exports has doomed the bloc's economy. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev has said. This week, U.S. President Donald Trump announced sweeping tariffs in an attempt to improve America's balance of trade, accusing the country's economic partners of exploiting access to its consumer market through protectionist policies and currency manipulation. Medvedev, God, man, I'm sorry, his name just trips me up. Now deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, remarked on Thursday that while the move seriously disrupts global commerce, Russia will be largely unaffected as its trade with the U.S. is virtually non-existent. No need for knee-jerk reactions, he posted on social media. We should take I love this. We should take a seat on the shore and wait for the enemy's corpse to float by. In this case, the decaying corpse of the EU economy. And that is so brilliantly said. The expression, which advises patient inaction, has been attributed by Western authors, including Umberto Eco, to various Eastern sources, and may be a misinterpretation of a remark by Chinese philosopher Confucius, which does not mention dead bodies. Outgoing German economy minister Robert Habeck has compared the potential impact to the escalation of the Ukraine conflict in 2022, then to, quote, something new was happening and we were not prepared in Europe to cope with the challenge, he said during a press conference on Thursday. Yeah, and it's very well said, because Europe is in an absolute economic crisis right now. We've been talking about that on various shows for a while. And because of their 40% tariff, they're now getting against the U.S. They're now getting a 20% tariff against them. And, we don't need European products. I mean, a lot of the stuff that Europe sends to us are like considered luxury goods. And one of my favorite actually is to go back to, and I don't know if I actually ended up using this. I don't think I did. Oh wait, yes I did. Yes I did. This is from the Financial Times. The headline is "Bling, Bags, and Booze Fall Victim to Trump's Trade War," and that's because a lot of the stuff, and they're talking about Europe, the stuff that comes over from Europe to the United States, are high-end fashion items. Like think about all the fancy purses, Louis Vuitton, like all that stuff, right? The fancy fashion. Salvador or Ferragamo, that's like one of the shoemakers, and then the wines, the cheeses that come from France. I mean, all of that, it's all luxury stuff. So it's the elite that are going to have to pay more for that stuff, and they're still going to pay for it because they can afford to. But they're probably going to buy a lot less of it, and certainly people maybe in the middle class who were indulging in that stuff, they're not going to be paying a 20% markup for it. So boo-hoo. I mean, so this negatively impacts degenerate spending habits. I think that's very based, and it's a very, very positive thing. So I'm all about it. And then finally, well, let's get this one. Musk's father says Tesla tycoon admires Putin. Elon Musk has kind of been making the rounds lately. I don't know if y'all have noticed that, but it's pretty funny. Elon Musk says his family looks up to the Russian leader for his calm leadership and logical speeches. Elon Musk has said that his son Elon and their family admire Russian President Vladimir Putin. Speaking to the BBC, the billionaire's father described the Russian head of state as a strong leader and praised his logical speeches. Musk, who is CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, also leads the U.S. Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, overseeing U.S. President Donald Trump's efforts to streamline government operations and cut inefficiencies. The elder Musk said that he believed his family was impressed with the Russian leader. Quote, it would be foolish not to admire him because he is always calming, quote, he added. Musk went on to say that he listens to Putin's speeches and believes he says logical things while noting that his views were based on personal observation and not political alignment. Quote, if you evaluate him as a man to a man, and I'm not talking about relations between countries and the like, he is a strong leader for me, end quote, he said. When the interviewer claimed that Putin had started the war in Ukraine, Elon Musk pushed back, saying that it would only become clear over time who had truly started the conflict. He nevertheless defended his son's stance. What he did when the war began, he immediately gave Starlink to Ukraine, end quote, he said, but this war doesn't end. It goes on and on. And it's so spot on. Anyone, and this is a lot of my positions on world leaders began to change when I just went and started listening to the leaders. I stopped getting my news and my information on these leaders from the media, including like the quote unquote alternative media, like Breitbart. Breitbart is not nearly as transparent and like as they claim to be, by the way. They very much toe the line, especially in like when it comes to like neocon positions, when it comes to like Russia, certainly Israel, that kind of stuff. But if you just go and you listen to these guys speak directly, including like Maduro, go listen to what Maduro says, go listen to what Kim Jong-un says. You learn that there actually aren't the crazed leader that Fox News wants you to think they are. And it's very, very eye-opening. And I would encourage everyone to go to the source. And then there are a few interesting little Russian stories we'll hit real quick. U.S. to skip Ukraine military aid meeting for the first time. Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth will reportedly not attend the Ramstein group either virtually or in person. And this is referring to the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, or UDCG, also known as the Ramstein Group, is set to convene in Brussels on April 11th for the 27th time since the escalation of the conflict in 2022. Founded by Hegseth's predecessor, Lloyd Austin, the 50-nation coalition has provided more than $126 billion in military aid to Kiev, including F-16 fighter jets and large quantities of 155-millimeter artillery shells. An unnamed U.S. official told the outlet on Wednesday that Hegseth would not attend in person and is not expected to join virtually either. The Pentagon is unlikely to send any senior representative who typically accompanied the secretary on such trips, the official said. Washington is still assessing how its officials will participate in various Ukraine-related forums, including those overseeing arms deliveries and training, according to the source. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And the reason I share that is because now we are looking at this. This is from today's news. Trump's inner circle opposes new Putin call. This is coming from RT again. The U.S. president's advisors reportedly insist on any new engagement should be conditioned on a full ceasefire in Ukraine conflict. U.S. President Donald Trump's advisors are urging him not to call his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, before Moscow commits to a full ceasefire in the Ukraine conflict. NBC News reported on Thursday, citing two anonymous officials. This is so funny. The U.S. leader previously told the media outlet that he intends to talk with Putin again, potentially as soon as this week, following their previous conversation on March 18th. Trump, who is trying to mediate a truce between Moscow and Kiev after more than 3 years of hostility, stated on Tuesday that Putin and Ukraine Ukraine's Vladimir Zelensky are ready to make a deal thanks to his efforts. Let me see if there's anything about Riyadh, because the hubbub certainly is. There's not. So like the other news is that the Riyadh meeting that was supposed to happen this month in April is now being pushed back to May. And I think that's all probably just because they want this narrative to play out a little more. But it's very clear, Trump is he's pitting people in his administration against one another. He's causing division, I think, on purpose in order to drive conflict, because the conflict will then drive resolution. And I think there's a kind of a civil war happening inside of MAGA, and that's a good thing. We want the civil war because a lot of these issues need to be resolved. There's still a lot of warmongering sociopaths running around with MAGA hats on who want a war with China. They want a war with Russia. They want a war mostly with Iran. But they know that a war with Iran will lead to a war with China and Russia. And Russia has actually expressly said that. And so here's another article on this. It says third parties trying to derail U.S. talks, Putin envoy. So that last story was coming from the Trump administration. Trump administration people told NBC News that, right? Now this is the Putin administration telling their own media that the same thing's happening. Third parties are trying to derail U.S.-Russia talks. Certain countries now the Trump officials were saying that it was people inside the administration who didn't want Trump to talk to Putin, and now this one is saying certain countries want to throw a wrench into the normalization of Russian-American relations. President Vladimir Putin's investment envoy Kirill Dmitriev has said. At least they put a name to his quote. Man, that's big. He made his comment following a rare 3-day trip to Washington, where he met with officials. Different countries are trying to derail this dialogue, derail the restoration of the Russian-American relations, end quote. Dmitriev told reporters on Thursday evening. He noted that the negotiations have been accompanied by a lot of rumors, incorrect quotes, and incorrect interpretations. A lot of people are interested in preventing the development of our relations. We are seeing a coordinated campaign in the media, attempts by various politicians to undermine the relations between Russia and the U.S., and attempts to distort the statements made by Russia. But diplomats said it happens on a daily basis. The best way to overcome disinformation is direct dialogue, he stressed. Dmitriev reportedly met with Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, who has been one of the key U.S. negotiators on Ukraine. According to NBC News, the Russian diplomat also met with Republican Senators Lindsey Graham and Markwayne Mullin. Great. Those two are. And remember, Markwayne Mullin is the guy who's been coming out being like speculating on NBC. Maybe there is a sovereign alliance. Like CanCon's been playing that on Badlands Daily. That's laugh out loud funny. But of course, we're still getting this. The EU's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, claimed last month that Russia cannot really be trusted. The Ukrainian leader Vladimir Zelensky suggested on Friday that Trump is trapped in a disinformation bubble. Trump has blamed Zelensky for the conflict, while his Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg argued that the EU should be sidelined during the negotiation. So I still kind of think Keith Kellogg's playing a role. He's been removed from he's no longer the Russian envoy. That's now Steve Witkoff, because Russia doesn't trust him. He's only the Ukrainian envoy. But he's sidelining the EU. So, I think it remains to be seen what's going on with Keith Kellogg. We're going to hit an hour. We're going to go over an hour today again. And, the show, frankly, needs to be longer than an hour. And apologize to Maha News. But I do want to talk about Syria. And I think talking about Syria, we kind of have to, before that, let's do the ad read. How's the chat doing? I'm operating off a laptop. I don't have a second screen. I really never have a second screen, but that also prevents me from being able to monitor the chat. Man, we got some rants. We'll hit those rants. We'll do the ad read and then we'll hit some rants. And yeah, I mean, this was supposed to be a 1 hour show, but it's hard to get all this stuff done in an hour. Sorry, not sorry. All right. So this is from Safe Streets. Now is the perfect time to secure your home and your loved ones. Get a free ADT smart home security system valued at $1,200 from ADT authorized provider Safe Streets. Plus, get a Google Nest doorbell camera at no cost and a $200 Visa gift card from Safe Streets, the most trusted name in home security with more than 106,000 4.9 star Trustpilot reviews. Visit getsafestreets.com/badlands or call 925-529-6541. That's 925-529-6541 to speak to a representative today. $99 customer installation charge and purchase of a new monitoring service required for their termination fee apply. And that's Safe Streets. Thank you, Safe Streets, for your support. We appreciate you. Definitely worth just noting this. We're not going to go deep into it, but major child sexual abuse platform dismantled. Europol, the Kid Flicks streaming service, has been shut down in an international operation, according to a press release. And I can just give you the bullet points on this because I wrote about this the other day. But it launched in 2021, as it says right here. It hosted more than 91,000 videos. These are pedophile videos. And it had around 1.8 million users worldwide over a 3-year period. And more than 35 countries participated in the operation. And man, it's just, my response to this was we're going to need more millstones, because every single one of those users deserves a millstone. And I don't care if that makes me a bad person for saying that. I'm just quoting the Bible when I say it. So it is what it is. Man, what a depraved world we live in. Okay, before we go to Syria, let's just hit this real quick because we did Africa on Wednesday. Russia pledges defense support to African nations. Moscow has said it is ready to help build joint armed forces for Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. These are our guys. These Burkina Faso. We talked about Ibrahim Traore a bunch on Wednesday. But the three of them, they make up the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES. They went to Moscow yesterday. They did a press conference with Sergei Lavrov. There's Lavrov right there. And speaking after a meeting with his counterparts from Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, Lavrov stated that Russia is prepared to actively assist in building the capacity of the joint forces of the Sahel States, enhancing their combat readiness as well as that of the national armed forces of each of the three countries, and in training military personnel and law enforcement officers. It's worth noting that the Wagner Group has been there in those three countries, helping them, training them, fighting ISIS. The ISIS presence in those countries is off the wall. It is insane, like the map of how many terrorist organizations are there. I'm very certain that Ukraine is funding that stuff. And actually, I don't need to even speculate, because from yesterday's news from that same meeting, Ukraine is a sponsor of terrorism. The Malayan foreign minister says, Abdoulaye Diop has met with his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, in Moscow to discuss regional security threats. Malayan foreign minister Abdoulaye Diop has accused Ukraine of supporting terrorist groups in the Sahel region. He made the remark during a press conference in Moscow on Thursday after talks with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, as well as the foreign ministers of Niger and Burkina Faso, Mali's fellow alliance of Sahel states members. These terrorists are supported by external actors, regional actors present in our region who assist them and provide them with logistical support. For example, Ukraine. The minister said, Ukraine is a sponsor of terrorism, and this must be stopped, Diop emphasized. Lavrov echoed these concerns, asserting that Kiev has become a destabilizing force in Africa. Quote, some extra-regional players are still attempting to destabilize the region. Among them, in addition to the former colonizers, talking about France, there has been, and that's not their quote, that's my insertion, there has recently been a Kiev regime that, with the full connivance of its Western sponsors, openly supports terrorist groups in this part of Africa, Lavrov states. The military rulers of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have all accused Ukraine of arming and training Tuareg rebels and jihadist insurgents in the Sahel region after officials in Kiev allegedly provided intelligence to rebels for an ambush last July that killed scores of Malayan soldiers as well as Russian Wagner Group contractors. These claims have been echoed by French media outlets, but are denied by Kiev, despite the Ukrainian military intelligence spokesman claiming responsibility for the insurgents' attack. That is so funny. So funny that the Ukrainian military intelligence spokesperson took credit for it, and then like Zelensky still denies it. And there were, the video made the rounds last summer of like an entire unit. It was like 40 guys from Wagner got wiped out in this ambush, and the video was all these dead bodies. Could be totally fake. I mean, we have that caveat. Chris Paul is certainly right about that stuff, but I think it's reasonable to assume that there are conflicts happening in Africa and they are violent. There's a real power struggle happening. And then the last thing I wanted to hit on Africa, and then we'll pivot out. And I know I keep teasing that, but I thought this was hilarious. I've seen this like everywhere. And so this is not just, even though there's no sourcing on this, I've seen this around enough that I think this is real. Russian top oil company Gazprom has discovered 50 billion barrels of crude oil in Burkina Faso. So France has controlled that region, the Sahel region, which is Western Africa, for like 200 years. I mean, there is oil in Western Africa that's been pumped, but as far as I know, Burkina Faso was always known for like its gold. It wasn't known for oil. And now all of a sudden Russia goes in there and they find the oil. Too funny. Too funny. All right, let's hit some rants and then we will pivot. And I've had a lot of people asking me to do Syria. So we are going to go over an hour today. Sorry about that. Ashley D, $5. Thanks you. Well, thank you, Ashley. I appreciate your support. I think you've ranted on every one of these shows, so I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much for being here. If you would please hit the thumbs up, that definitely helps. It sends feedback to John that it's okay for me to go over an hour, but it also helps us climb the Rumble leaderboard. We got a lot of new people coming into Rumble, like content creators who are already like established players, like Tim Pool and all them, and they're elbowing out Badlands and other content creators. So being the one like homegrown Rumble channel, I mean, we gotta keep us up at the top of the Rumble leaderboard. So make sure you're hitting the thumbs up on all Badlands shows to get Badlands up there. Radar Screener, $10. Recommendations: 1, lose the jacket. You are not John Harold. Keep it that way. 2, background needs to be busier. Keeps the attention of low IQ people like me. 3, a few more smiles and jokes. Radar Screener, I appreciate that. I will do more smiles and jokes. Actually, this background is kind of a joke, but again, I'm at my in-laws' house today. So Rise Attire, if y'all are listening, y'all made that meme of me with the jacket on, with that Badland, like you were copying the Anchorman bit, and you made the Badlands like diagonal background. Send me that graphic. I will put that up as like the green screen background moving forward. If you could send me that graphic, that would be awesome, because that thing looked great. Keith O'Higgins, $1. Was that floating corpse line about Obama's chef? Medvedev is cooking Kiev chickens. That guy, he is always like running his mouth, and he's kind of like, he's like the jester when it comes to Putin's regime, because he always makes the funny joke. Miss Truth Seeker 1776, $1. Appreciate your take, Ghost. Keep up the great work. $1. Appreciate that. Miss Truth Seeker and Keith O'Higgins, thank you for the support. Radiant Seas, $10. Blessed Friday, Mr. Gordon McCormick and Badlands. May Father God and Christ Jesus be with you all and family, and bless everyone. Good health and godly protection. Have a great Friday and joyful weekend all. Thank you so much for your support and being here. Badlander fan, $10. Thanks so much for your hard work and time. We are very appreciative for Badlands. Love you all. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. Rise Attire in the chat says, got you, bro. Where should I send it? Either X or Telegram. If you have like the graphic, just send me the largest resolution file you can. I have to play with I got to play with StreamYard to figure out how to do it. I'm sure Brad can probably help me figure it out, but either X or Telegram, and I'll scoop it from there. So appreciate that. Yeah, so let's go to Syria. Let's talk about Syria. Syria, there's a lot of stuff happening in Syria, and one of the great follows, if y'all aren't following him, is this guy, Kevork Almazian. He's a friend of mine. He's blown up over the past few months. Like he used to have, I think he had like 15,000 followers when I first started following him about a year ago, and he's just because I think of all the stuff happening with Syria, he's really blown up over the past few months. So I'm super happy for him. He actually has appeared on Joseph Napolitano's show, I think twice now, if I'm not mistaken. And he did like a great segment with him. So he had me on his show last summer to talk about Trump and kind of indulge like my thinking and what Trump was doing geopolitically. This is when Trump was out of office. And, you know, he doesn't agree with everything that I say, and he probably doesn't even buy into the sovereign alliance theory. But I really, really appreciate, and I certainly don't agree with everything he says because I think he's looking at things from his perspective. But I definitely respect the work that he does and the stuff he puts out. And he's not very, very high on Trump because I think he believes that Trump is in Israel's corner too much. But I have conveyed to him that I think that that's all ruse and that's not going to come full circle. So we'll see. But anyway, he is at Kevork Almazian on X, and I'll throw his Twitter handle in the chat. And he put this video out the other day. It's a 3-minute video. I'm going to put it on 1.5 speed and we'll listen to him. He has an accent. So his story is he's from Syria. In 2012, when ISIS came into power, they kidnapped his brother, and his family escaped Syria and fled to Germany. And so he's been living in Germany ever since. He started a podcast, I want to say back in 2019, called Syriana Analysis, where he basically talks about Syria. And you know, he still has a lot of friends that are back there. He has contacts in the government. And I mean, he's been all over like the Assad collapse and the rise of Jelani and everything that's been happening there. And I think he's been really spot on because he called it. He said that these guys that everyone's celebrating overthrowing Assad are actually ISIS. They're actually Al-Qaeda. They're actually going to impose Sharia law. And that's exactly what has happened. He's not very high on Saudi Arabia, so him and I disagree there. But let's listen to what he says here.
I hate to say that I told you so, because this comes from a position of arrogance and even patronizing. However, I predicted, this was in December 11th, 2024, that the Jolani regime will eventually normalize ties with Israel, and we will see the Israeli flag eventually flying over the skies of Damascus. I just want to make the bold prediction, which I might be wrong, but I believe that between 3 years to 5 years from now, we will see an Israeli flag flying over Damascus, and Israel will have its own embassy, and therefore the new Syria will normalize ties with Israel in the near future. The new Syria will normalize ties with Israel. On the 1st of April, and this is not the April's Fool, Ariel Oseran, he is an Israeli journalist, Middle East correspondent for I-24 News. He says, scoop. The new Syrian government is engaged in efforts to establish back channels with Israel. A Syrian source with knowledge of the matter tells me. These efforts are aimed at laying the groundwork for potential normalization between Syria and Israel, and are taking place with the support of Saudi Arabia. We received today multiple reports from different personalities, some of which is in Israel. For example, Eddie Cohen, who is another Israeli journalist and researcher. He says US President Donald Trump will meet with the new Syrian president, Ahmed Shara. Ahmed Shara is Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, immediately after his visit to Israel in mid-May. And the meeting is going to be in Saudi Arabia with the mediation of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. So as you can see, what happened in Syria had nothing to do with democracy, human rights, and all the BS, let's call it a BS, that you have heard on your mainstream press for a long time, for 14 years, that they have to oust Assad because he's a dictator, you know, like he's committing human rights violations. I mean, Jolani has just committed a genocide against the Alawites and the Christians in the coastal cities, and before that he has been the leader of the Al-Qaeda offshoot in Syria and in Iraq. What really matters is geopolitics, and in this case, Jolani's handlers, basically in the US, in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in Turkey, they have told him that he has to make peace with Israel. This is just my 2 cents. Let me know your opinion about this. Do you think that Jolani will normalize ties with Israel? And if he does so, what do you think is going to be the reaction of the people who pretended to be pro-Palestine for the past year, meanwhile supporting the Jolani regime and saying he is this liberator of the Syrian people? And especially the Palestinians who supported Jolani. What do you think it's going to be their reaction when they hear that Jolani has turned out to be just an asset for the United States and Israel, just like I said he is for a very long time?
Yeah. So, great analysis by Kevork. I really do think he has like the thread, like generally speaking, while I may disagree with him on like certain details. And he has information that I don't have because he's speaking to people directly in Syria. So he has more information than I ever will. And he of course is from there. So he knows a lot more about Syria than I ever will. I want to read through this thread. I think it's only like,
I truly hate
it's only like 8 posts, but he says the fall of Damascus was never about democracy. It was never about freedom. It was always about geopolitics, breaking Syria's defiance against Israel and dismantling the, quote, axis of resistance, end quote. Now the grim finale is here. Syria's new regime is allegedly, and by the way, just to give full disclosure, Kevork is a Christian. So he is I believe he's a Coptic Christian, if I'm not mistaken. But it's just being from the Middle East, I think it's important to convey that because people don't understand that places like Syria, places like Palestine, they have Christian populations that never are. Lebanon are never discussed, and they're not. And that's for a reason, because if people understood how many Christians live there, they probably wouldn't look the other way when it comes to these like mass genocides and bombing campaigns. And it's sick that you have to look at it through that lens, but that's just the way we've been hardwired. He says, now the grim finale is here. Syria's new regime is allegedly normalizing ties with Israel. The surrender could be completed soon. In 2024, when I warned that Syria's post-Assad leadership would bow to Tel Aviv, many called it alarmist. He did call that, by the way. He said at the very beginning that that Jolani was going to bow to Israel, that he was basically Israel's puppet. But the script was always clear. Billions spent arming extremists, cities leveled, millions displaced, all to rip Syria from Iran's orbit and force it into the moderate Arab camp, the same one that abandoned Palestine. Now Israeli journalists report back-channel talks between Syria's interim government and Israel, brokered by Saudi Arabia. The U.S. is prepared for a Trump-Jolani summit. Who's Jolani, a former al-Qaeda leader, now repackaged as a statesman? The irony is grotesque. Why Syria? Because it was the last holdout. Egypt made peace. Iraq was destroyed. So, and he's saying that Egypt made peace with Israel. That was back in 1979. Iraq was destroyed after 9/11. We all know that. Lebanon is bled dry. Lebanon has, ever since Israel was driven out of Lebanon in 2000, they were invited in the early 1980s. 1982, I believe, the IDF was invited into Lebanon by the Lebanese government to fight Hezbollah, or not Hezbollah, to fight the PLO, to fight Yasser Arafat and the Palestinians who had taken refuge in Lebanon. And the IDF, so the Shia, like Yasser Arafat and the PLO were Sunni, and so the Shia government were like, yeah, come on in and kill these guys for us. That would be fantastic. And they came in there and they never left for 18 years. And it took 18, and because of that, because the IDF never left for 18 years, that's what led to the rise of Hezbollah. Is Hezbollah started as like a political movement, and then it became a military movement to fight the IDF because the IDF refused to leave Lebanon. And so in 2000, they finally got, and like they came in there and they built, Israel, the Israeli settler movement. Like they came in, they built neighborhoods, and Israeli citizens were living in Lebanon, and the same thing they were doing in Palestine. And so anyway, they finally got them out in 2000, and they've been in conflict ever since. They had a war with Hezbollah in 2006. Hezbollah won that war while they were fighting Hamas. Hamas won that war as well. And then we've seen what has happened recently. They've just been bombing all of Hezbollah's leadership. So it says, but Syria refused to surrender, and defiance made it the target. Now, with Syria's collapse, the new regime has no choice. The terms: no return of the Golan, already annexed; No resistance, army shattered. No support for Palestine, normalization demands silence. In exchange, a hollow promise of stability, i.e., the U.S. won't tackle Jelani for now. The tragic twist, the same pro-Palestinian voices who cheered Syria's destruction must now watch as their revolution paves the way for another Arab-Israeli handshake. Jelani, a former jihadist turned U.S. puppet, will shake hands with the same powers bombing Gaza to rubble. This is the new Middle East Washington and Tel Aviv wanted, a region where every nation is either subservient or destroyed. Syria was the last domino. Now it's fallen. The only question is who's next. So Kevork is right about some things, but I think he misses a few things. And this is where I think like I hope my analysis is right, and I can't promise that it is, but kind of like the little wedge, like the little like sliver that I think I've carved out for myself is looking at this stuff from a different perspective than a lot of these other people look at it from, and that's understanding the sovereign alliance theory, the devolution theory, even the Q stuff, like even understanding that to a certain extent. It's not the foundation of like what I look at, because I do my analysis based on actionable items that are being reported in the news, whether or not they're real. It's the narrative that's being reported that these countries are claiming is happening. Saudi Arabia absolutely funded ISIS and Al Qaeda. They created ISIS and Al Qaeda years ago, back when the CIA was deeply embedded in Riyadh and had control over their all the bad actors in the Saudi royal family were working with the CIA to do that, and they were the ones financing this stuff. So Kevork is right. That is what I think he's leaning on when he looks at this stuff. Is he's looking at the fact that historically Saudi Arabia has been the financier of Jelani, of guys like Jelani, and Jelani was absolutely, for 25 years, he's been a head chopper. He's been the guy on video. First it was with Al Qaeda, then it was with ISIS, cutting off people's heads, Christians' heads mostly, but also Muslims as well, Muslims who were defiant. So I think when he's looking at this and he says that Saudi Arabia is brokering this negotiation, this peace between Jelani and Israel, the only reason I disagree with him on that is not just because I think MBS opposes ISIS and opposes Al Qaeda and opposes guys like Jelani ultimately. It's because I think that Jelani, just like Kevork, works directly for Netanyahu, who works directly for the Israeli deep state, the U.S. deep state, the CIA intelligence, Mossad, MI6 apparatus, as it were, like whatever you want to call it. And so I don't think like a brokerage is necessary. I don't think there needs to be a third party broker. These guys are already in touch. I mean, who do we think unleashed Jelani in the first place? My theory on this, and I'll provide the theory, and then we'll hit a few more articles and get out of here, is that they knew they were coming. Russia was in Syria. Hezbollah was in Syria protecting Assad. They knew these guys were coming. They knew that ISIS was coming to fight them, and there was supposed to be a big fight, like a big war. And so instead of giving them that war, Assad reportedly, it's been reported that he told all of his soldiers to lay down their arms and basically not resist. The only people who fought back were basically just like guys who wanted to fight after Assad left. Assad then falls back to the Russian military bases that are on the coast of Syria, and then the Russians reportedly force him to exfil on a helicopter and get out of there right before the base, gets attacked. And so I think that was Russian maneuver defense. I think the Russians were basically feigning a retreat. They pull Assad out. They let these guys occupy the space in Syria. It's unfortunate what's happening there with the Sharia law and the Christians being targeted. That is extremely awful, assuming that it's all true. And, just like the Gaza thing is awful, assuming all that's true. But the alternative was a much wider regional war, where many, many more people would die. And ultimately, I think people are seeing for themselves what these people are. It's very obvious who Jelani is. I mean, if anyone who's done their homework understands that he is a former ISIS, former Al Qaeda guy. He's trying to change his name to like Al Shara or something, like like MSNBC and Fox News. They all call him this new name that he wants everyone to call him by, because Jelani is associated with ISIS and Al Qaeda. But, there's been some rumors that Russia might be helping Assad come back. So we might see like this full circle moment where Assad comes back. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But it's very obvious to me that Jelani is working for the bad guys. He was installed by them. And I would assume that would also mean Israel. And if you know anything about ISIS, ISIS has never attacked Israel. There was only one event, November 2016, where ISIS attacked Israel. And I'll just go ahead and show it. ISIS attacked Israel in the Golan Heights. And this is from April 24th, 2017. So this is 6 months later. Moshe Yale, it says, ex-defense minister says, this is from the Times of Israel, says ISIS apologized to Israel for November clash. Moshe Yaalon's office refuses to elaborate after alluding to contact with the terror group. Former defense minister Moshe Yaalon on Saturday said the Islamic State terrorist group in the Syrian Golan Heights apologized for attacking an Israeli unit. There was one case recently where Daesh, which is ISIS, opened fire and apologized, Yaalon said, using the terror group's Arabic nickname. This was an apparent reference to a clash that took place near the Syrian border last November in which IDF troops exchanged fire with members of the Islamic State affiliate. After a brief gun battle, the Israeli military attacked the terrorist group with airstrikes and tank fire, killing 4 of them. Israel and much of the Western world considers the Islamic State affiliate in the Syrian Golan Heights, known as the Khalid ibn al-Walid Army, to be a terrorist group. Communication with them is technically illegal under Israeli law, constituting contact with an enemy agent. And yet they reached out to the defense minister to let him know, hey, man, sorry we attacked you, even though 4 of their guys got killed. So like 4 of their guys got killed, and they still went and apologized to Israel for attacking them. There's no other recorded incident of them ever attacking the IDF or them ever attacking Israel. And if you go and you look it up, go ask Grok, go ask any AI you want. Has Al-Qaeda ever attacked Israel? Al-Qaeda has talked about attacking Israel a lot, but as far as I can recall, there are no reported attacks, official attacks, where there have been reported attacks where they're like, oh, Al-Qaeda attacked Israel, and then you dig into it and it was actually a different group that wasn't actually technically Al-Qaeda or something like that. I mean, it's always like some weird splinter group. It's very strange, and it's probably because these groups are created as controlled opposition dynamics, in my opinion, and there's a reason they exist. So it seems to me that Jelani probably is working for Netanyahu. Now let's look at the why, and we're going to spend 5 to 7 more minutes on this. We'll hit boost and we'll get out of here. This is from the Cradle, Mohammed Hassan Swedan. I hope I'm saying his name right. This is from March 20th. And actually, let's jump back a little bit. Let's jump back to March 13th. We'll kind of run through a few headlines. This is from TASS, the Russian news agency. This is like a pro-Putin news outlet. It says Israeli aviation, meaning the Air Force, hits residential neighborhood in Damascus. No casualties or damage have been reported yet. The Israeli Defense Forces carried out an airstrike on residential neighborhood in the Syrian capital. The Sana news agency reported, which is the Syrian news agency. According to it, a residential building was targeted in the Jumar neighborhood in northwestern Damascus. No casualties or damage have been reported yet. So this goes to speak to what Kevork was saying in that video, that he thinks that we're going to see an Israeli flag flying over Damascus soon enough. And I've been saying the same thing, not because he's saying it. My own analysis leads me to think that. Here's March 17th. Lebanese troops carry out attacks on firing positions in Syria. So according to earlier reports, a shelling assault from Syria killed a child and left 4 civilians injured. The Lebanese Armed Forces Command has ordered troops stationed on the Syrian border to open fire in response to the shelling of their country's northern and eastern areas from Syria. An army representative said in a statement on Telegram, early in the morning, army units began to carry out attacks on firing positions in Syria using artillery systems, mortars, and drones. The statement reads, according to earlier reports, a shelling assault from Syria killed a child and left 4 civilians injured. The Lebanon 24 news outlet reported that at least 50 projectiles had exploded in northern Lebanon. Syria TV, in turn, said that the strikes had destroyed a weapons depot belonging to a Shia militia linked to Hezbollah. According to the broadcaster, the losses that Syrian units suffered in border clashes have risen to 6 fighters. The Al Nahar newspaper wrote on March 16th that a Syrian special forces unit had mistakenly entered Lebanon, coming under attack by local tribal militiamen linked to Hezbollah. As a result, 3 Syrian troops were killed. A source from the Syrian Interior Ministry provided a different version of the incident, blaming Hezbollah members for allegedly crossing the border into Syria, kidnapping and killing 3 security officers. The Hezbollah press service issued a statement denying involvement in the developments taking place on the Lebanon-Syrian border. So a lot of finger pointing. He said, she said. You have the Lebanese military, which is their national military, the Hezbollah militia allegedly involved, which is a separate fighting force from the Lebanese military, and then Syrian special forces. And then it's unclear, like, when you say Syrian forces, are you referring to the Syrian military? Are you referring to the Jelani guys? It's hard to say who's who because technically Jelani is the head of the government. So it is difficult to say. March 24th, Israel carries out airstrikes on military facility in Sanaman, south of Damascus. Hold on one second. All right, let's see. Israel carries out airstrikes on military facility in Sanama, south of Damascus. Israel has carried out these airstrikes facilities. So Israel is striking a Syrian city, 43 kilometers south of Damascus. This is a couple weeks ago, March 24th. All right, and then you have this is March 25th, the next day. Acting Israeli ambassador says no talks with Moscow about the future of Russian bases in Syria. Alexander Ben-Zvi stressed that it was up to Russia and Syria to resolve that issue. The Israeli authorities are not in discussion with Moscow on the future of Russia's bases in Syria, as this is a bilateral affair between Moscow and Damascus. Acting Israeli ambassador to Russia told TASS in an interview, and they're basically just saying it's not us. But there's a lot of uncertainty. These 2 bases that Russia has been using since the 1980s, since the Cold War, and since then you have this would be the base at Tardis and the base at Al Khamenei, I think is how you say it. It's an air base and a naval base. And the Wagner Group has been using these as staging grounds for their operations in Africa. And we talked last week about how, highly suspect that Israel has a very strong interest in reclaiming its mineral rights it lost in Africa. So the idea, there's this big negotiation now. Is Russia going to be able to maintain this base in Syria, which if it loses that access to that base, it would definitely hinder or impact its African operations. We just did a story about how they're trying to help the Africans stand up on their own 2 feet and defend themselves. So you can see how this stuff is all kind of connected. I hope this is all making sense. So now we can kind of jump back to let's jump back to this article from The Cradle, the battle between Greater Israel and the Neo-Ottomanism in Syria. As Israel escalates its warnings about Turkey's hegemonic ambitions and military influence in Syria, a once strategic partnership is unraveling into a deep rivalry that could reshape the region. And so this is a really great article. I'm not going to read through it because it would take too long, but I'll kind of hit some of the bullet points. So it says, from partners to rivals and geopolitics, alliances are often temporary. I'll throw this link in the chat along with the other article I'm going to share, and y'all can kind of read through it yourself. But it says, in geopolitics, alliances are often temporary, dictated by mutual interest rather than ideological alignment. Israel and Turkey once shared strategic cooperation in the 1990s and early 2000s with extensive military and intelligence ties. At the time, both states saw Iran and Syria under Assad family rule as common adversaries. However, as regional dynamics shifted, latent competition between the two emerged. Today, Ankara and Tel Aviv find themselves on opposite sides of Syria's post-war restructuring, each viewing the other as a direct rival. In other words, 2 countries can be official allies or at least non-enemies, and yet compete for regional hegemony. And, I talked about this, I think, on John's show on the Daily Herald a few weeks ago, but or it actually may have been on Breaking History. I can't recall. But one thing that's important to understand, let's pull a map up because I think a Middle East map is going to help us here. I want a better map than that. Let's go back. Here we go. Okay, so you can kind of see, I think we can zoom in here. Yeah, there we go. So you can see here's Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Turkey. And so really what that article was getting to was, 25 years ago, 20 to 30 years ago, Turkey and Israel were allies, like very strong allies. And that's because Turkey is a cornerstone of NATO. Operation Gladio operations have been launched from Turkey for the past 70 years. Colonel Tanner Watkins can give you all the receipts on that. And because of Israel's strong connection and ties to Europe and the United States, and as well as Turkey's, that's the reason there. Turkey also in the 90s was posturing, trying to join the European Union. They became like an official observing member in 1998. And they were basically trying to pivot themselves to become a European country. Now, of course, they're trying to pivot back and become, like an Eastern country and join BRICS and join the North-South transportation corridor. And that's what makes them kind of one of the big enigmas of the world. But they always had Syria as this buffer between them, right? Because obviously the cultures of Turkey and Israel are very different. But one thing that I've seen a few really good analysts point out, and there's some Substack articles, I should go find them and link them in the chat, in the comments. But because Syria has now fallen, and Trump talked about how Syria was the one who did that. Syria invaded from the north, which is 100% true. You had Syria invading from the north. You had Jelani and his guys invading out of Iraq from the south, and they basically met in the middle. The Turkish forces, you had the Kurds, this river right here splits Syria in two. So everything on the east belongs to the Kurds. The Kurds have kind of controlled this. That's where all the U.S. bases all are. Like whenever you hear about a U.S. base in Syria, it's always east of the river. East of the Euphrates River in Kurdistan. And so Jelani took the south and pressed all the way to the coast, and he took Damascus, which is right around here where my I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but it's just east of Lebanon, like down here. Like if you go like where it says Lebanon, if you go directly west, and then the S in Syria, if you go directly south, kind of like right there, that's Damascus. So Jelani took Damascus. And then Aleppo, which is like a major Damascus being the political capital, Aleppo being like a major trade center, historic trade center. In the north, Turkey took Aleppo. And there was, rumor about Turkey marching south and taking Damascus, because nobody technically has taken that yet, like aside from Jelani. But there's talk now about the IDF moved in from the Golan Heights and kind of occupied this very, very southern quadrant down here, like where, right, like this little cup where you see Jordan. They kind of occupied that little region as like a defense, quote unquote, defense buffer. And they've been slowly moving north to Damascus. So when Turkey found out about that, they're starting to race south to Damascus. And you can see maybe a better map here. Let me see if I can get you a better map. Let's find a Syrian map. Yeah, here we go. All right, so here's Damascus, like I said, next to Lebanon. And so Jelani takes Damascus. They took Aleppo, which is way up here, Turkey. And they said, well, we're going to march south and we're going to take Damascus. Now, the point is, it doesn't matter who has Damascus right now. It's Jelani. But what effectively has happened when you understand that Jelani is working for the IDF and working for the U.S., what effectively has happened here is this buffer that existed between Turkey and Israel has now been removed. And now they basically share a border. If you consider that the Jelani regime is basically a puppet proxy regime for Israel. And especially if the IDF moves north and takes Damascus and Turkey moves south and basically kicks out Jelani, which could very well happen, you're going to find Turkey and Israel sharing a border, which is going to lead to conflict, or very likely could lead to conflict. That's speculation. So it's a very, very dangerous time. Very, very things are escalating very quickly in Syria. And I definitely think that this article right here from February 20th, Israel's strategic ambitions in Syria, fragmentation, the David corridor, and confrontation with Turkey. This article outlines what is called the David Corridor, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit more next time because I'm not going to keep going. But the David Corridor is this idea that Israel is going to establish. If I flip back to this map, Israel is going to establish, because Israel is technically allies with the Kurds up here in the north, in the northeast. They're going to establish a corridor along the southern border of Syria between Israel and the river and the Euphrates, so they can have a direct physical connection to the Kurds. And that's what Jelani feasibly is setting up for them. So we'll see that actually happens. That's what this article is laying out right here from February. And then this Cradle article from today from Madi Yagi, he talks about that as well. David's Corridor, Israel's shadow project to redraw the Levant. And you can see the red arrow going all the way up to Kurdistan. And this is all about the vision of greater Israel, which I've talked about on many, many shows, and kind of laying that groundwork. So maybe we'll get into that a little bit more next week. But I don't want to keep going. I don't want to keep taking up time from Maha News. So let's see what other rants we have, and if we have any boosts. All right, so I think the last one we hit was Badlander fan, $10. Thanks so much for your hard work and time. We very much appreciate. We are very appreciative for Badlands. Love you all. Thank you. I'm Scooter Pie, $20. Oops, wanted to leave this with my rant. Check the chat regarding Le Pen with receipts. Okay, so right above that, I'm Scooter Pie says, whoa, Le Pen's sentence deferred until next summer. 3 judges had to go into hiding from Political UK and Sues on X. Yeah, that's a big story. We're not going to get to it today, but maybe I'll cover that with Brian on Daily on Tuesday. And that's kind of the nice part about me doing all these different spots is I can split this up and not have to cram it all into one show. Eleanor, $2,010. Gordon, keep the jacket. As we know, the intent is for more professionalism. Most of all, thank you for the amazing geopolitical analysis to make sense of the chaos. Thank you, Eleanor. I appreciate you. Yeah, I'm going to keep the jacket for now. And it's not to like alienate people. It's just to, for this one show, like not on the other shows, just this one show. If I'm going to be doing this by myself, I don't know. It's just, it feels right. It feels right. And plus the conversations I've had, it's like, as General Quast said, when you dress better, you elevate your behavior. And I think there's a lot to be said about that. Keith O'Higgins, $1. I heard the road to Damascus can be transformative. Well said. 10H Gal now, $10. Great job, Gordon. Thank you. 10H Gal now. Thank all of you for your generosity. Thank you for your support. Please hit the thumbs up. I'm going to check the boosts. And if you're not familiar with this, if you go to badlandsmedia.tv and you up in the upper margin, there's a link that says boosts. And a boost is kind of like a Rumble rant that you can leave anytime. Kind of the benefit is that there's no Rumble, I think, takes like 20 or 30% processing fee when they commission that. So this is Badlands gets to keep all of this, or the content creator gets to keep all of the boosts. So, but we appreciate everything, all the support. Let's see what we got. Awesome. So Star Spangled Steffi, $5. This is from March 28th. I love you doing the show by yourself. A co-host would slow you down. I think you'll get your flow more in time. I've already seen great improvement. Keep up the great work. I love your shows. A must watch. You make me smarter. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very, very much. Really appreciate that. Yeah, I'm trying to get better. I do think every show I'm going to get better at this stuff. I do want to parse this thing down as much as possible, maybe 90 minutes, because I know that 60 minutes is probably a little too ambitious. I'm not John Harold. I'm not that TLDR. But thank you. Mian Na, I hope I'm saying that right. March 28th. And thank you for the DMs, Mian Na. I will get back to you on that. $5 Ghost. I appreciate your contribution to Badlands Media and have learned a lot from you. I see Balkans getting boosted in the narrative lately, and your guess on breaking history was very wrong. Are you interested in an input from a true local? Oh, awesome. Yeah. So you're a true local and then you left your Gmail. Yeah. Let's talk. I'm definitely interested in having you on to potentially talk about this, but let's talk. I'll get back to you. And I think that's it. Sweet. So we're done. We're good. We're going to get out of here. Not the shortest show I've done, but it is what it is. Thank you all for your support. Please hit the thumbs up. My kids have been like, my kids just woke up from their nap and they've been banging on the door. So I got to go corral some children. But let me do the outro. Badlands Media intro, Badlands Media outro. And all right, you all have a great day. Have a great weekend. See y'all next.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.